Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurzbacher, and today we're going to talk about hitchhiking, not just around the United States, but around the world. Thumbing, as it's also known, is a scary idea to most people, whether you're the one picking up a stranger or the one getting into a stranger's car. But if you saw the big beaming smile that today's guest wears, my guess is that you'd feel just a little more comfortable with the situation. I have with me Daniel Shackery from Los Angeles, California, who has been living the thumb life all over the world since 2013. He's been on over 10 long-distance hitchhiking adventures in North and South America, Africa, Europe, and Asia. When he's not adventuring, Daniel works in sales and spends most of his time talking to strangers. Once you experience his infectious energy and enthusiasm, you'll quickly realize he is no stranger. Let's find out about his journey. Daniel, welcome to the campfire.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Man, I'm so excited about this. I just love how just joyous you are. Just like you just have this zeal for life. It just beams. It's so cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, man, you've been adventuring all over the world since 2013. You've been to every continent except for Antarctica and Australia. And you adventure in a very unique way in that you hitchhike everywhere you go. So let's just dive in. Why hitchhiking?
Well, I love hitchhiking because I've always been fascinated by people, and just something is very exciting about the idea that in this digital age, I can still get into the car with a complete stranger and get to know that person and be fully immersed into the local culture. And the main reason is because I have found that I'm able to just have experiences by hitchhiking that I would never have in any other means of travel.
Yeah, I guess so. All kinds of experiences. So, what are, we talked in the intro about you've been all over the world, but what are some of the long distance hitchhiking adventures that you've taken?
Some of the longest ones that I've taken is I went from Prague to Madrid, so that's about half of Europe. I also did, Africa. That was from Malawi to Namibia, where I passed through Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia. And I went from Canada, from Toronto to BC, so almost the entire country with the exception of far East Canada.
Yeah. So that's Europe, North America, Africa. Let's keep going. Let's hit them all.
Yeah, I've done it in Vietnam, from Saigon to basically the border of China. I've done Turkey. I've done Turkey through Kurdistan, so like Iraqi Kurdistan.
Yep.
And I've done Europe, several times. So in Europe, the longest one I did was from I started in Portugal. Portugal, and then I hitchhiked to Norway, through Spain, France, Belgium, Holland, a bit of Germany, Denmark, and then Norway. And Mexico twice, Central America, Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador. I've also done from Israel, Palestine, Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of territory, and all of that distance was covered hitchhiking.
All of it was covered by hitchhiking.
I mean, we're here to hear. We're on this podcast here to hear these extraordinary stories. I mean, and you've done this, the thumb life, all over the world, like literally. So I wonder if you could maybe share some of your favorite experiences with us, and help the listeners kind of dive into some of the details of what it's like to hitchhike all over the world?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where to it's absolutely incredible. My favorite part of it is, I would say, some of the most amazing experiences that I've had is because I hitchhike, I find myself in areas, towns that there's zero tourists, simply because there's no reason for tourists to go there. But because of that, the locals have more of an interest in me and why I'm there, because it's not common to see foreigners there. Specifically in countries like Vietnam or places in Africa where I obviously look like I'm not a local. And in some of these towns, I remember specifically in the countryside of Vietnam, I met this family, and it was right by the border of China, and we were just speaking just through Google Translate. So I was speaking in English, they would hear it in Vietnamese, they would speak in Vietnamese, I would hear it in English, and we had this incredible connection. And I sat with them and had dinner. We sat like around a like a rug, and just that we shared food. And just what I realized from that experience and just hitchhiking in general is how much you can communicate even if you don't share a common language, just through nonverbal communication, through smiling, through hand gestures, and what have you.
Yeah, and I love that. And so, but what you just described, like you're literally sitting with people. You talked about sitting around a rug, like you're in a someone's home, I presume, or a living room or something, right?
Hmm.
That's beyond getting into a stranger's car. Like, how does that happen? How do you end up in somebody's house sitting on their rug, like celebrating with them?
That's a great question, and the way for that is, whenever the reason for that is, oftentimes people ask me all over the world why I'm hitchhiking, um, and the reason I say is because it's my first time in this country, and I really want to meet locals and learn about the culture. So, and I have a genuine interest in the people that I'm in the car with. What I have found is, when I tell somebody that, I mean, think about it from their perspective. How are they going to interpret that? If your first time in their country, they feel, many of them feel like, I have this guest, I want him, I want to be part of his experience. And he wants to know about our culture, what we eat, like how we live. And I do believe that humans are innately good and welcoming.
Mhm.
And so, as a result of that, I've been invited into many people's homes. Also, there's a million times where it's getting late in the day, and I will get into the car and I'll tell them, whenever we arrive in destination, just take me to this and this hotel, motel, what have you. And they say, okay. But what happens in the interim is, I'll be in the car with them for an hour. We'll have an amazing experience. We'll laugh, joke. It's a new experience for them. It's a new experience for me. And they'll oftentimes invite me to their homes after, because in that hour we went from total strangers to now we're friends. And that's how.
Man, I love it. I want to break down what you said because I think it's really important. It's kind of central to this particular episode. You said when you meet somebody for the first time, you say, and I'm gonna ask you to repeat it.
um, when you meet when I meet somebody for the first time and they
And
ask me
they
why.
ask you why. Yeah.
So yeah, one of the most common questions that I get asked is, why are you hitchhiking? Because in a lot of countries they associate hitchhiking with having a lack of money. And I understand that, like, that's where the stigma came from. For me personally, I wouldn't it doesn't matter to me if I have $1 billion or $0. I would hitchhike for the experience. That being said, when they do ask me why I'm hitchhiking and I say it's my first time in Vietnam, and this is through Google Translate, so like,
Yeah.
it's been more of an experience. And I tell them it's my first time in Vietnam, and I want to meet the locals and learn about the culture. And that's what I say. It doesn't matter what country I'm in. I say the exact same answer. The
Yeah.
only difference is the language they hear it in.
It's my first time here. I want to meet locals and I want to learn about the culture. So
That's it.
it's a disarming phrase that's worked for you all over the world. Like, why is that disarming for people? Like, why does that open things up for them and allow them to open up to you?
Well, that's a great question. I've actually never been asked that. I think, and I always, just in any situation in life, but I'm going to apply it to this. I try and think about how I would feel if that was said to me. And if that was said to me, and if I was driving in California and I picked up a hitchhiker and he told me that, I would feel almost like a desire to do my part to make sure that person has a good experience in my country. And I also think, in some sense, that person is given an opportunity to be in a position he's never been in before. where he has a foreigner from a totally different background culture in his car next to him. And I think when you give somebody an opportunity to be friendly with you, I think that they want to show you that they're a good person. And also, again, in that hour that we're talking, I'm talking, asking them about the holidays in their country, the culture, the meals. I talk to them about anything that I find different in their country. That's a culture shock for me. And I think, and a lot of times that becomes funny for them. There's something also about humor that's also very disarming.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
It's so fun. I'm almost sitting here thinking, like my day job is in real estate, right? That's how I make my living. And, I spend a lot of my time going into people's homes. And, when you walk into somebody's home, it's their domain, right? And they always want to be a good host, right? And I almost feel like the way you ask that question, people like almost acknowledge, or they're kind of put into this place where like you are now in their home. It's their country, right? And it's a big place, but it's like you're the outsider and they're the host. And it's almost like you've come into their home and they want to be a good host for you.
Exactly. That is exactly it. I couldn't have said it better myself.
That's cool.
That's it.
Yeah, it's so cool. So like, could you share, and I know you've had some really unique experiences. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. Like, what are some of the things that people have let you into? You've attended things in countries that were kind of surprising to you, people that you've met and things that you've done.
Yeah. Well, I've been to weddings in I've been to weddings in Vietnam. I've been to wedding just in this last trip, literally the last couple of months. I was hitchhiking from Mexico, Guatemala, and El Salvador. And in Mexico and Guatemala, I went to weddings with people that I met hitchhiking. Also, the wedding in Vietnam was somebody that I met hitchhiking. And in Mexico, Guatemala, and El Salvador, I was invited to people's birthday parties.
So let's be clear. Let's be clear. This is not Wedding Crashers, right?
No. I can show you the invitation.
How does that happen? Like, walk me through that interaction, like how you go from complete stranger to going to a wedding.
Again, I think we have to try and see it from, okay, good question. So one of my favorite questions to ask people is, I'm fascinated by cultural traditions, be it births, be it initiation, like bar mitzvah, quinceañera, what have you, wedding traditions, even funeral traditions, even traditions regarding the tooth fairy. I think these are super interesting because what I found is, like, regardless of where we come from or what our native language is, we worldwide we share traditions for certain events. So oftentimes in the car, I enjoy actually asking the locals about their traditions in their country, and wedding is like one of the most common ones. And so, I mean, literally right now in Mexico and Guatemala, I was just asking people about like weddings, and somehow the conversation stumbled into that, and they invited me.
That's awesome. So it's your intrigue and interest in the custom, and they're like, hey, well, we can show you better rather than tell you, like, let us show you.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Man, it's so cool. So, we're going to get into the fear side and the, what we've been taught, especially in the US and Western culture, about whether or not it's safe to hitchhike. We're going to get into that. But before we do, I want to kind of explore this a little bit more, because like, by moving past that fear and doing this, like, you've had such amazing interactions with people and learning the way that you're learning, like you've shown up with this curiosity. What I want to know is, like, where did that come from, and how did you move past that initial, what we've been taught, that this is not a safe thing to do? Can you kind of take us back and help us understand the upbringing?
Of course. Well, I was born and raised in LA, which is, as in itself, a very multicultural city, obviously. And the specific part of LA that I grew up in was very multicultural. I had my neighbors next to me for most of my childhood one family was Hispanic, one was from El Salvador, one was Armenian, one was Korean. So from a very young age, from the time I was born, basically, I was surrounded by cultural diversity, which I think is one of the great things about growing up in a big city like that. And I just remember being a kid and in elementary school, um, going to friends' houses. Like I had a really good Korean friend, and I remember like seeing the food that his mom would make, and it was like different for me. Um, and I remember I had an Armenian friend, and like just like I remember I just remember one Armenian friend, his mom would make the same mistake in English when she would talk, and I was just like, and then my friend explained to me, because in Armenian you say it this way, so she was translating it like that in her head. And I was just always fascinated by these cultural nuances, it also at how as it pertains to linguistics, and that always just kind of stuck with me. I mean, always just stuck with me.
One of the things I wanted to talk about was this curiosity that you have. So you obviously have a curiosity about custom, but you also, you're clearly a people person. You like being around people. You like creating connections. Like you want to meet people, you want to meet locals and learn about their culture. Can you talk a little bit more for you specifically, like that drive inside you, that curiosity and that desire to connect with people?
Yeah. I just that's a good question. I think I think I don't know. That's a really good question. I have to think about that one for a second. I really don't know how to answer that, of like where that came from. I think I was maybe born with it. I really don't know. I was surrounded by it since I was a kid, and I can remember driving around LA when I was a child and seeing different neighborhoods that were predominantly this or that ethnicity, and thinking it was super interesting seeing like the signs in the restaurants and their language or what have you. And that always stuck with me. And I remember also going to Tijuana for my first time when I was like 12, and that was, even though Tijuana is not like such a crazy cultural difference, being that I'm from
Yeah.
LA. But I just remember like seeing the street vendors, the smells, the money. Pesos were a different currency, and it was just interesting to me how how people just live differently.
Yeah, I love it, man. And you have an energy and an enthusiasm about you. And you know, you've got some great reels on social media, and like that energy and the enthusiasm comes out in those reels. But like, has that always been who you are?
I was probably a bit more reserved when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Uh, but definitely from the time I started, like, when you hitchhike and you do door to door sales, it's you can't do those things and not be have a good energy or have a positive outlook or curiosity, because you know uh, both of those require everything that I
Yeah.
just mentioned.
Well, I mean, that energy and enthusiasm is infectious. And like, you know, one of the things you can see in the interactions that I've seen that you've had with people just on your social media is like when you bring that energy, like it spills over to them. Right. And then they give that energy back to you. So I'm just curious, like what that's like for you to show up with that and then to be able to receive it back.
Yeah, it's absolutely it transfers over. And it's not, it's a subconscious thing, right? Like when the person I'm talking to, when they feel that I'm happy, when they feel that I'm energetic, even when I smile, like if I smile at somebody, that person instinctively, subconsciously is going to either smile back or have a good feeling
Yeah.
within them. It's just how we're wired. There's no, it's, they can't even control it. And when I'm traveling by hitchhike, I'm happy. I'm generally in a good mood. I'm a happy person, and that people can feel that. It's reciprocal. It's and yeah, I think when they're in a good mood, when I'm in a good mood, and then they're in a good mood, it just spills over onto them, and then it just kind of snowballs from there into a good conversation, into an invitation, into what have you.
You said that when you are traveling by hitchhike, you just feel happy. Is it
So happy.
is there a freedom that comes with that? Is freedom part of that feeling?
It's definitely freedom. It's also a lot of adrenaline. There's something about being on the side of the road with your thumb out and having no idea about who's going to pick me up. They could be from any background. I mean, when you say like who picks up a hitchhiker, there's no this type of person. It could be anybody. And there's something about the idea that what city I'm gonna end up in, if I get a cool recommendation from that person about some restaurant, some place to visit, what have you. There's just a rush of adrenaline and a freedom that it's almost inexplicable.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you and I spoke before we've started recording this episode a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that you shared with me is that you have some things that you do personally to make yourself more approachable.
Yeah. So one thing that I learned from hitchhiking and door-to-door sales is people are judging you within seconds of seeing you.
Yeah.
So when that pertains to hitchhiking, what I do is I oftentimes will wear a jersey from the country that I'm hitchhiking in, because even if we can't speak, he can obviously see that, and just from that, there's a connection.
Yeah. I love
He
that.
likes this soccer team. I like that. I'm wearing that soccer team. Funny enough, actually, there's been many times where I've been traveling in countries and the person has given me a soccer jersey from their country because they've said I'll have an easier time hitchhiking in their country if I wear that shirt,
Oh, okay.
which is 100% true. I also have found that sometimes if the country is really easy to hitchhike in, it's not necessary. But in some of the harder countries like Italy or Spain, for example, I would often hitchhike with a banana. Well, I would be waiting with a banana or an apple. And the reason for that is once I was hitchhiking in Italy and the psychologist picked me up, and she told me that the reason that she picked me up was because the fact that I was eating banana made her feel more comfortable. And I was like, why? What? Yeah. And I said, why? And she said, well, because think about it. If I see you eating a banana versus seeing you smoking a cigarette, like eating something like a bag of chips, they're not the same. And she's right. Someone who's eating a banana or an apple subconsciously, like there's psychology behind it. Like it's yellow. I don't know exactly what the connotation is with yellow, but people do associate the color yellow with some feeling. And there's a lot of psychology behind colors, and so that's what she told me.
That
And
is so interesting. I love that. What a tip.
It's fascinating. I also hitchhike with my longboard. I mean, I'm from LA. A lot of people in LA skate, and there's something about well, outside of the US, skateboarding isn't nearly as common in most of the world, and so I have found that if I'm able to kind of like skateboard back and forth with my thumb out, it catches people's attention because there's a good chance they've seen that maybe once or twice in their entire life. Yeah. So also I think that like because in some countries hitchhiking does have a negative connotation, the more things that I could do non-verbally to demonstrate that I'm safe and that I'm like just a normal guy, the easier it is. So I also will try and like prop up my backpack so people could see that I'm traveling. Yeah.
I love it. I mean, this is, this shows experience and the tips. I am curious though, like the very first time, do you remember the very first time you hitchhiked?
Yes. That was in Prague in 2013. And a rock climbing instructor picked me up. I remember it vividly. I'll never forget it.
Take us back to that experience.
He had like I was at a rest stop just outside of Prague, and I remember I was a bit nervous, and
were you with other people?
I was alone, and I just remember being at the end of the rest stop, like kind of right before the off ramp or the on ramp, and I just had my thumb out, and he stopped, and I was like, hey. He's like, hey. And I said, where you going? He asked me where I'm going, and I just said, I said west. And he's like, are you going west? And he said yes. And he's like, hop in, and I was like, we just started talking. He spoke really good English, and he told me about being a rock climbing instructor, and he asked me why I was hitchhiking, and I remember I told him, like I told you before, it's my first time in Czech Republic, and I just want to meet locals, learn about the culture. He was like, cool. And we had a good conversation. We went out and got some coffee. He dropped me off, and that was it. But that guy was the first time I ever hitchhiked.
Daniel, tell me, like, take me back to the moments when you decided to like hold out your hand with your thumb up. Like, was that scary for you?
Yeah, even until now, the first time that I hitchhike in the country, I have my stomach's kind of like I'm a bit nervous, even
Yeah.
till now. But yeah, the first time it was very nervous, and the reason it was very nervous is because I grew up in the U.S., where I was taught by parents, society, teachers to be scared of strangers. So by hitchhiking, I'm doing the exact opposite of what I was taught from a young age. So logically, I'd be a bit hesitant.
So let's get into safety, because those are a couple of the topics I want to make sure we cover here on this episode today. Let's talk about what we're taught, that it's not safe. Don't talk to strangers, and gosh, that like getting into a car with a stranger, that's like the next
Yeah.
step beyond don't talk to strangers. Like what is your take on what we were taught about hitchhiking growing up in the United States?
Well, we were taught that it's dangerous, not just hitchhiking. We were just taught strangers are dangerous. We grew up in a society where we see Amber Alerts. How is it possible that seeing Amber Alerts and being taught that strangers are bad is not going to have some and also when you're taught it at your most impressionable age as a child, it would be crazy. It would be crazy to think that it wouldn't have some impact
Right.
on the way that you view the world.
Right. So, I mean, there is some truth to what we were taught. Yes.
Yeah. Are strangers bad? Yes, definitely. Like there are people that are bad in the world. There are obviously crimes committed, robberies, what have you. Of course. I also believe that if you get your news solely from the news stations or social media, you will have a skewed version of reality and proportionality of how dangerous the world is. This is what I mean by that. We're wired psychologically to be more interested in negativity and crime than positivity. That being said, for example, if you watch the news and there's a outburst or some incident with an Uber ride, they will show that on the news.
Mhm.
For one incident that's negative with Uber, thousands of people go from A to B just fine. But the news doesn't talk about that because it doesn't sell. The news talks about that one time out of thousands that it was bad. So, do bad things happen? Yes. Are there bad people in the world? Yes. Should you be, is it a bad idea to walk alone at 2 a.m. drunk in a foreign city? Probably yes. However, I do believe that most people are innately good and innately not dangerous.
So I appreciate your take on that, and I'm going to use a stupid pun because I feel like I have to. But do you have any rules of thumb that you follow when you're hitchhiking to keep you safe?
Yeah, I go with my gut. Well, I do two things. I use common sense, what I believe to be common sense. Sorry if that sounds condescending, but I didn't mean it to come off across that way.
No, it's all good.
What I mean is, if the person looks like they're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, I wouldn't get into the car.
Okay.
If the person, if the person, if I have a bad feeling, if I use my intuition, I have a bad feeling, I don't get into the car. If the person is, if I just, yeah, I mean, mostly if they're drinking or driving, or if I have a bad feeling, or yeah, that's pretty much it. I also will carry pepper spray with me. Just like I've never had to use it in over 10 years and thousands of rides of hitchhiking. I've never used it, but I do carry it with me. And I don't really hitchhike at night. I have once or twice if I was kind of in a jam, but I hardly do that. Um, if I really try to avoid arriving in big cities late at night.
Hmm.
because generally big cities tend to be more dangerous. I will often ask beforehand, is there a specific area? Like when I was in Sudan, for example, there were specific areas of the country that were in like conflict zones, so I
Yeah.
didn't go to those places. I try to have my be prepared.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like you said, if you feel like somebody's under the influence or, you approach a vehicle and your gut says no, what is that experience like for you? And how do you gently decline? This person's pulled over for you. How do those encounters go?
Well, if I see that they're under the influence, I'll say, yeah, actually, I'm waiting for a ride from somebody else. Like,
Yeah.
I've lied and said that I'm using actually a blah blah car, and I thought that you were that person, but you're obviously not. Or I'll say, you know what? Actually, the bus that's going exactly where I need to go is going to be coming in the next 15 minutes. I'm just going to wait for that, but I
Gotcha.
appreciate you. And in order to disarm them so they're not upset. But by the way, I'm having an amazing time in your country. The food's great, and I hope you have a great night.
Yeah.
And like, yeah,
And then the big Daniel smile.
yeah. Then I smile, and then like that way they avoid getting upset or taking it personally or what have you.
Yeah. So been doing this for a very long time. I think we figured out 11 years, 5 continents, over 10 long distance adventure. Have you ever found yourself in a precarious situation hitchhiking?
Yeah. So there were two instances in Vietnam where I've never been in danger once actually in the car. But there was one instance specifically in Vietnam where in retrospect, it was just a cultural misunderstanding. So what happened was I was trying to hitchhike, and this guy came. So yeah, he came out, and he tried giving me money because he was under the assumption that I was hitchhiking because of a lack of funds. So I politely declined, and he continued to insist, and I kept declining. And then at some point, he physically and forcefully grabbed my hand and tried putting the money into my hand. After which I pulled my hand back. I turned around and I walked the other direction. And then he came in front of me and started screaming at me like he was very upset. Obviously, I don't understand Vietnamese, but I did assume that the reason that he was upset was because I didn't take his money. And before I knew it, there was a circle of people, and he was speaking to them in Vietnamese, and they were looking at him, looking at me, looking at him, looking at me. And I was like, wow, this is not a good situation. And then somebody in the crowd came up to me with a phone, then handed me the phone. The person on the phone spoke English. And the person on the phone told me that I was being very disrespectful, that the person found me to be arrogant because I should be taking what was offered to me, meaning the money. And it was at that point where I understood that it was a cultural misunderstanding, because the way that I was raised was you shouldn't take handouts if you don't need them, and that it's polite to decline. And I think it's safe to assume the way that he was raised is that if you offer a gift to somebody, they decline. That's not okay.
Yeah.
So the exact same act is interpreted in a different way depending on where you're raised. So he was doing what's normal for him. I was doing what's normal for me. In any case, that happened. And actually, that's one of the biggest issues with hitchhiking is like sometimes you have these customs that are different depending on where you go. So another issue like that is when you greet somebody. That is like one of the hardest things, because you take one example, Italy, or Spain, where they're very warm cultures, and it's common to kiss. Um, Even women, even men, like um, and so there were times in Spain. I remember like this woman gave me a ride, and like she tried to give me a kiss, and I tried shaking her hand, and it was just this awkward moment. And I said, "Sorry, I'm not. I don't know what the norm is here." When then the other side of the spectrum is in Sudan. It's inappropriate to even shake a hands with a woman, so it's very difficult to gauge that.
I'm really excited about this part of the conversation because we touched on it a little bit, you and I, before this call. And I just, as we pivot away from safety, it's so interesting because, we were having a conversation about safety and potential precarious situations. And in all the time that you've traveled, you didn't really have any safety related, like, people with bad intentions. This was just a cultural misunderstanding. Um, and I think that's incredible. And I really do want to move into the cultural piece because you are somebody that, your whole thing is, I want to meet locals and learn about your culture. This is somebody that's traveling the world with curiosity. Like clearly what happened with the guy in Vietnam was just a cultural misunderstanding. But I really do want to hear about some of these cultural differences that you've experienced around the world and how that's changed you.
Yeah. Okay. So one, like I mentioned, definitely how to greet somebody. Another one is political correctness. Um, so in the States, we are very politically correct. There's a lot of things. Oh my God! Like, and the personal questions. Like in the States, there's so many things that are inappropriate to ask a stranger. Um, and in other countries, that is not the case at all. It's like the complete opposite. For example, I just in El Salvador, I remember I was talking to this one woman. She was making pupusas, traditional
Yeah.
El Salvadorian food. She was making that, and she was asking me some questions. And she started asking me if I had a girlfriend, and I said no. And I said we broke up. And then she asked me like, why did we break up? And she like just going down that rabbit hole of
Yeah.
like the details of our relationship. And this is I don't know who she is. I
Yeah.
don't know why she cares. But it was funny to me that she was asking these questions, or especially with voting, like in the States, you shouldn't ask like political questions to strangers. It's not really socially acceptable. In other countries, that's completely common. So definitely the personal questions is such a difference between the way that I was raised in the West and in other countries. That's one. Another big one is retirement homes. So in the States, it's common that when people get old, they go to retirement homes, and it's not frowned upon in our society. Whereas in other countries, in many countries, I would even probably say in most countries, it's common that the parents stay with the child until they
Mhm.
pass. And not only that, the idea of putting your parents in a retirement home is not okay because it's viewed as kind of kind of disposing of your parents, whereas they see it as when you were born, your parents take care of you. Now the roles are reversed; you take care of them. Um, yeah, I mean, other examples. Um, yeah. Um, I would also say even like some things like recycling or like littering, like here in the States, there's all these signs like against littering because we're very like in a lot of the states, especially in LA, we're very conscious and educated about environmental protection. In other countries, they have it's not a pressing concern because I think that they have more in other countries that are not as developed. They're more than likely they're trying to live for today. So, planning for like environmental protection for the future is something that it's not something that's too common.
Yeah.
Um a lot of things also even like insurance, for example, like in the States, everyone has car insurance, a lot of people have health insurance. In other countries that are poor where they live for today, they don't have insurance because many people don't have insurance because that's something that's planning for the future.
Yeah. It's so interesting. And I think one of the things for you is when you get to some of these countries you've never been to before, you don't know. So you don't know what the culture is. There's some places where it's okay to kiss when you greet. It's other places where, you don't even shake hands with somebody. And if you don't know, what are you supposed to do? And you have a very unique way of addressing that when you're in a new country.
Yeah, I just ask. I just say it's my first time here. In different countries, people greet each other different ways, and I just want to be sure that I'm doing what's in line with the culture here. So what's the best way to greet you?
And how do people respond with that?
They're usually like, I think they are a bit amused because they've never been asked before, and they
Yeah.
also like respect it because they understand that I'm trying to respect their culture. And
Yeah.
then they just tell me, and then I can't do any wrong because whatever I do after that is because they told me to do that.
Yeah.
That's
I
it.
mean, it's easy. It's pretty straightforward.
People appreciate the straightforwardness. People appreciate the honesty. And
Yeah.
people appreciate that when other people say I don't know, when they don't know, that they say I don't know.
Yeah. So I think one thing that strikes me in this is that it speaks to like differences around the world and people having like what they believe is right, and then crossing that boundary of behaving in a way that kind of violates what people think is right. And then, offense gets taken, like the man in Vietnam. I like totally understand, there was a cultural difference, but there was an offense that was taken, and he didn't understand that you didn't know, and you didn't know what he was saying. I guess I'm curious if that experience for you has opened you up and made you more accepting of other people that potentially violate something that you consider to be a norm. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. 100% true. What I learned from that experience and what still pertains till today when I travel or even when I'm here is because we have so many immigrants in this country. People are a result of their environment, of how they grew up, from the music they listen to what they think is culturally appropriate, not appropriate, to who pays on the first date, to what questions they like, everything. So I try to be I try to be patient when I'm talking to somebody that's from a different country, or when I'm in a different country, because I understand that. And and there's been times where, somebody may have done something that I would perceive as rude or inappropriate that I no longer do, because I understand that that person is doing what's in line with what he was taught of how he grew up. And because of that, I cannot hold it against them.
Yeah. I guess I'm curious for you, like if there are things in all of your experiences that you still take offense to, or perhaps maybe when you're in a country where that behavior isn't offensive, but it is somewhere else, maybe what offends you personally is different depending on where you are. I guess I'm just curious your take on that.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to offend me. I don't really get offended really easily. I
Yeah.
mean, I but roles reversed, I definitely try not to offend. Um, yeah, I try to be mindful of that, but sometimes you can't know. Like I
Yeah.
remember vividly when I was in Bahrain in it's a in the Gulf.
Yeah.
I remember sitting like with my leg kind of crossed, and in that culture, it's extremely rude because it's like my foot is being faced is my foot
Right.
is in the direction of their face.
Yeah.
And I remember that was like people told me constantly stop doing that, and I had to really be mindful of it because
Yeah.
I had never heard of that before. So I try my best to be mindful of where I am and what is culturally appropriate and not, and to just not offend anybody.
Yeah. I feel like for me, like the learning just in this conversation is both. It's like, it's an understanding that people see things differently and having great respect for that. But it also makes me wonder like how much like disagreement in the world is based on that simple misunderstanding of what people believe culturally. Does that make sense?
Oh, I'm sure a lot. Yeah, it makes total sense, and I'm sure I I'm sure a lot of it because I don't know if a lot of people have the um if they have the wherewithal to really like understand the basic idea that what this person is doing or saying is not because they're a bad person, but it's because of
Yeah.
how they were raised and what they're accustomed to and what they were taught.
Yeah.
They're not doesn't equate to them being bad.
And this, Daniel, is why what you're doing and your simple phrase, right? I want to meet locals and I want to learn about their culture.
Mm.
Like if everybody did that, there would be a lot more understanding in the world.
1,000%. Yeah. If we just take the time to just speak. Yeah.
So one thing you told me was that when people pick you up, you love asking people why they picked you up, and you get some fun answers.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. Probably the funniest one for me is boredom. It's just so honest. Another one is probably the most common one is I've done it before in my life. I've also heard curiosity, especially with the skateboard. I have heard you see, I've been told I look I have a nice face. Like not an attractive way. I say face. That's what I've been told. I've been told the soccer jersey. I've been told a big one, like I said, is curiosity. Especially when I physically look like I'm not from there. Which again, obviously if I'm in, Vietnam, I don't look like I'm Vietnamese. So people are curious about that. If I have a sign from where the place I'm trying to go to, if someone's going there, they'll just be like, well, I'm going there too. Yeah.
Love it. So listen, I love adventure. I fully admit I'm the product of a society and an upbringing that's taught me that hitchhiking is dangerous. I definitely still have that fear inside of me personally, and I know others do. I'm just curious, based on your experiences that you've had all around the world, what advice do you have for people like me that still carry that concern?
Well, the first thing that I would do is I would validate it because I understand why you feel that way. I would also encourage you with the idea that most growth starts when you leave your comfort zone. So essentially, I think doing what you fear is probably the best way to grow as a person and have new experiences. And that being said, I would say if it's something that interests you, I would definitely recommend hitchhiking. And it's not only because of you'll be able to meet the locals and learn about new places, but also because of the way it improves your communication skills, your social skills. The fact that you're going to be sitting in a car with somebody for 10, 20, 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, it's not possible not to talk to that person. And there's so much growth that happens in that car ride. And these skills that you'll gain can benefit you in all aspects of your life. And I would also say, I mean, personally, I'm happy to help anybody or give anybody advice. If they have any questions about hitchhiking, they can reach out to me. I'll do my best to answer those questions. And I would say if you do want to hitchhike, then I would start in a country that is easy because, I can understand that hitchhiking in itself can be challenging at first. So the added difficulty of hitchhiking somewhere it's a bit more uncommon, thus more difficult, might be too much for some people.
Well, let's give a practical one right there. You said easy. Where is the easiest place?
El Salvador, I think, was probably the easiest. I did not wait more than like 5 minutes. It was so easy. Vietnam, incredibly easy. Granted, in Vietnam, most people have motorbikes, so I recommend what I did, which was I brought a helmet with me and I primarily hitchhiked on motorcycles. Let's see, Vietnam was Iraqi Kurdistan, super easy. Let me see. Brittany, France. France in general is very easy, especially Brittany. Belgium also very easy. Holland was easy. Bosnia, the countries in the Balkans, easy.
Yeah.
Most countries are easy. Yeah.
While you're going through this list, this question, it's a burning. Of all the places that you've been, where's been the most welcoming?
Sudan.
Yeah?
Man, I cannot even begin to describe how amazing the Sudanese people are. They are just so kind, so hospitable, so welcoming, just hearts of pure gold. I remember vividly in Sudan specifically, people always wanted to help. They wanted to just give me like something. They wanted to have a cup of coffee or tea or food. I remember there was this one guy, he gave me a ride. He didn't have anything. he literally took a paper clip and he's like, "You might need this," and he just gave me a paper clip, literally a paper.
That's awesome.
Sudan is the number one. What's that?
He just wanted to help. That's amazing.
He just wanted to help. Just
Yeah.
wanted to help. Sudan, for the kindness of the people, bar none, number one. I also went to a wedding there, actually.
I love it.
Yeah, it was Sudan. Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel, you mentioned you're happy to answer questions. If people want to find out more about you, get in touch, support your adventures, what's the best way for them to do that?
Instagram, TikTok, My Thumb Life.
My Thumb Life.
Thumb Life. Yes.
Got it. Got it. All right. So listen, I mean, you've been all over the world. You have all these incredible hitchhiking adventures. You have, you're helping bridge this like gap of understanding between cultures. It's incredible. Like there's so much. It's profound what you've been doing. And at some point, Daniel, Hollywood's going to find out about you and they're going to want to make a movie about your story. And when they do, I want to know who's going to be the Hollywood actor that's going to play you in your movie.
It's going to be either Brad Pitt or Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh, nice. Come on. Who are you going to choose? They're both interested. Who do you want?
Leonardo DiCaprio.
All right. Leonardo DiCaprio. I love it. What's the movie going to be called?
My Thumb Life.
My Thumb Life, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. I think he'll do that movie. I think it sounds awesome.
He would. Absolutely.
I think he's all in. Man, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it. And for those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. I hope Daniel's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening, Daniel. Thank you so much for being here.
The pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much.